GNOSIS chat here. This is Sydney, 2009, early February. A GNOSIS chat on the subject of something you've seen. It's aimed at 50-year-old people who understand already at their age, with all their experience, that the winning side of a conflict is not always the best quality side, and frequently the lesser quality side comes out on top by sheer numbers. And I'm going to talk, just as an example, a very modern day thing where we've seen the rise and fall of a technology and its extinction. But it's interesting that in the early 70s, or late 70s, video recorders came out, and there were two competing types, Betamax and VHS. And the television stations, without announcing anything, simply bought up the Betamax system because it was markedly, technically superior to the VHS. But VHS heavily outgunned Betamax in sheer weight and investment in advertising and preponderance of manufacture. And so ultimately Betamax became an extinct species, certainly in the eye of the average consumer, and VHS covered the earth. VHS video recording machines covered the earth. Now, later born people can be excused for thinking that VHS is the only type of video cassette recorder. They would be quite wrong. It's forgivable that it's only because of their youth, and the fact that the propaganda is already there, the information in the environment around them is already there preceding their birth. So it's easy for people to be wrong about these things. That's an example of the lesser quality thing winning. Happens throughout history. And I want to point out to you that there's a similar conflict been going on since time immemorial between a gnosis and a religion. Possibly the most notable Gnostic of all time is Joan of Arc, an illiterate French girl who was ultimately burned by the victorious British in the south of France. She was a Gnostic. That means she knew God directly, and she had visions in her mind's eye. She was given verbal instructions, shown pictures. She was able to know events in advance, and she provided critically important information to French generals. She served her purpose by rallying local people, etc. But in her court case, which is remarkable and has been even made into historic plays, this illiterate French girl somehow argued the best lawyers to a standstill repeatedly. And she was doing this because God was speaking directly through her, rather like Abraham Hicks, that you may have seen on YouTube. Now, that's a temporary type of gnosis that occurs when it's needed only. In the case of Abraham Hicks, it's called up to quite deliberately. In the case of Joan of Arc, it simply happened to her when it was needed in the courtroom. That didn't stop her being burned, of course, but she would have to be the most famous Gnostic of all time. Now, preceding Joan of Arc in the 1400s was in fact hundreds of thousands of Gnostic peoples in the south of France. And they were hunted to extinction by the Vatican Church, the Catholic Church that we have today. The reason being was that the Gnostics, proliferating in number in the south of France, repeatedly taught that there's a God available to everyone. As long as you know the way to get there, you really don't need a franchise of churches around the land owned and operated by a religion that's in bed with the local government. That all of that is irrelevant to knowing God, finding God directly. Those were the principles of Gnosis, and a lot of people learning Gnosis from its teachers there discovered it was correct. Now, the Gnostic teachers were so well liked, so many of them were barefoot healers and that sort of thing, barefoot doctors, etc. They had to be exterminated because they were a threat to the great religion of Catholicism, and they were utterly ruthlessly. There were crusades, that's religious troops, motivated by their belief in religion, killing Gnostics. tens of thousands sometimes at a time, over a period of a couple of 100 years. Now, this is somewhat similar to the conflict between VHS and Betamax VCRs that you have seen today. If you're over 50 years old, you're well familiar with the wrong product winning. Now, religions have never delivered God to any individual, but Gnosis does. That's the stark difference between any of the great religions and Gnosis, which is a totally natural process and does not involve state-sponsored, state-operated religious affiliations. Another thing is that you'll notice, if you read your history, you look up Cathars, Albigensians, early Christian Gnostics, they were heavily marginalised also by the might of the Roman Empire. And one thing you will notice, read up in your history books, the Gnostics never formed armies. They never went looting, marauding, pillaging, stealing more territory. They never formed standing armies. Because they are non-violent people, because they are highly developed individuals, they know God directly. Their understandings may not always be perfect, but it stops them being ultra-violent. Now, contrast that with the religions that won the day and carried out the extermination. Religions carry out ultra-violence with the greatest glee, justifying it with some just twisting of words and careful indoctrination of the masses who do what they're told. And you can soon see that the great religions are, in fact, simply a way of tying people up with obligations and rituals that suit the needs of the state. So there's a huge difference between the religions and Gnosis. Now, you can be forgiven if you are a religious person for believing that religions, well, that's all there is. It covers the earth. Wherever you're born, there's a religion around the corner. Rather like VHS video recorders covering the earth when Beta was exterminated. Beta was still superior, still used at the bitter end by the television stations who really know their TV technology. But they lost the battle in the open arena for the public dollar. It's a crying shame that religions have won the day against Gnostics throughout history. However, the tide has now turned. Gnosis now has a major strategic advantage. It's now available in a website, truebluehealer.com, and you get physical evidence in 20 minutes that you have already changed. Biochemical switch closure occurs in you, and a week or so later you start to get messaging dreams, and then some more independent signals, and just 4 months later a whole new type of physical signalling commences. So if you're an evidence-based thinker, lay Gnosis is for you.